The Rabbit's Bride. There was once a woman with a daughter in a beautiful garden with cabbage. There came a rabbit, and, greedy at winter time, ate all the cabbage. Then the woman said to her daughter, "Go into the garden and chase away the rabbit." The girl said to the rabbit, "Shoo, shoo, you rabbit, don't eat all the cabbage." The rabbit said, "Come, girl, sit on my little rabbit's tail and come with me to my rabbit hutch." The girl did not want to. On the next day, the rabbit came again and ate the cabbage. Then the woman said to her daughter, "Go into the garden and chase away the rabbit." The girl said to the rabbit, "Shoo, shoo, you rabbit, don't eat all the cabbage." The rabbit said, "Come, girl, sit on my little rabbit's tail and come with me to my rabbit hutch." The girl did not want to. On the third day, the rabbit came again and ate the cabbage. Then the woman said to her daughter, "Go into the garden and chase away the rabbit." The girl said to the rabbit, "Shoo, shoo, you rabbit, don't eat all the cabbage." The rabbit said, "Come, girl, sit on my little rabbit's tail and come with me to my rabbit hutch." The girl sat on the rabbit's tail, and it took her far away to its hutch and said, "Now cook some green cabbage and millet. I am going to invite the wedding guests." Then all the wedding guests came together. Who were the wedding people? I can tell you, as someone else told me, they were all rabbits, and the crow was there as the priest to marry the couple, and the fox as the clerk, and the altar was under the rainbow. But the girl was sad because she was so lonely. The rabbit came and said, get up, the wedding folks are lively." The bride said nothing and wept. The rabbit went away, then came back and said, get up, the wedding folks are hungry." The bride said nothing and wept. The rabbit went away, then came back and said, get up, the wedding folks are waiting." But the bride said nothing, and the rabbit went away. So she made a straw figure dressed in her clothes, gave it a pipe, and set it by the pot with millet, then went back to her mother. The rabbit came again and said, get up, and opened up and hit the straw figure on the head so that its head fell off. Then the rabbit thought his bride was dead and went away sadly. The 12 Huntsmen, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Once there was a king's son who was engaged to a maiden whom he loved dearly. While he was sitting beside her, happy and content, news arrived that his father lay seriously ill and desired to see him one last time before he passed away. He said to his beloved, "I must leave now and part from you, but I give you this ring as a token of my love. When I become king, I will return and take you with me." So he rode away, and upon reaching his father, he found him gravely ill and near death. His father said to him, "My dear son, before I depart, I wish to see you one last time. Promise me to marry as I wish." And he named a certain king's daughter who was to be his wife. Overcome with grief, the son agreed without thinking, saying, "Yes, dear father, your wish shall be fulfilled." With that, the king closed his eyes and passed away. Once the son was proclaimed king and the mourning period ended, he had to fulfill his promise to his father and arranged for the marriage with the king's daughter as requested. When his first betrothed heard of this, she was so distressed by his perceived betrayal that she nearly died. Her father then said to her, "My dearest child, why are you so sad? You shall have whatever you desire." After a moment of thought, she replied, "Dear father, I wish for 11 girls who look exactly like me in face, figure, and size." Her father said, "If it is possible, your wish shall be granted." And he searched throughout his kingdom until he found 11 young maidens who resembled his daughter perfectly in face, figure, and size. When they arrived at the king's daughter's palace, she had 12 sets of huntsman's attire made, all identical. The 11 maidens put on the huntsman's clothes, while she herself wore the 12th suit. She then bid farewell to her father and rode away with them to the court of her former betrothed, whom she loved so dearly. There, she inquired if he needed huntsmen and if he would accept them all into his service. The king looked at her and did not recognize her, but seeing they were such fine fellows, he agreed, saying, "Yes, I will gladly take them." Thus, they became the king's 12 huntsmen. However, the king owned a lion that possessed a wondrous ability to know all hidden and secret things. One evening, the lion said to the king, "You think you have 12 huntsmen?" "Yes," replied the king, "there are 12 huntsmen." The lion continued, "You are mistaken. They are 12 girls." The king said, "That cannot be true. How can you prove it to me? Oh, just have some peas scattered in your antechamber, answered the lion, and then you will see. Men have a firm step, and when they walk over the peas, none of them move. But girls trip and skip, dragging their feet, causing the peas to roll. The king liked the idea and had peas scattered. However, there was a servant of the king who favored the huntsmen, and upon hearing of the test, he went to them and revealed everything, saying, "The lion wants the king to believe you are girls." The king's daughter thanked him and said to her maidens, "Exert some strength and step firmly on the peas." The next morning, when the king summoned the 12 huntsmen, and they entered the antechamber where the peas lay, they stepped so firmly that not a single pea moved. They then departed, and the king said to the lion, "You lied to me. They walk like men." The lion replied, "They knew they would be tested and exerted themselves. Now, bring 12 spinning wheels into the antechamber one day, and they will come and take pleasure in them, which no man would do." The king was pleased with the advice and had the spinning wheels placed in the antechamber. But the servant, who sympathized with the huntsmen, went to them and disclosed the plan. Then, when they were alone, the king's daughter said to her 11 girls, "Restrain yourselves and do not look at the spinning wheels." The following morning, when the king summoned his 12 huntsmen, they passed through the antechamber without once glancing at the spinning wheels. Again, the king said to the lion, "You deceived me. They are men, for they did not look at the spinning wheels." The lion responded, "They knew they would be tested and restrained themselves." However, the king no longer believed the lion. The 12 huntsmen always accompanied the king on his hunts, and his fondness for them grew ever stronger. Once, while they were out hunting, news arrived that the king's betrothed was approaching. When the true bride heard this, it pained her so deeply that her heart nearly broke, and she fell unconscious to the ground. The king thought something had happened to his dear huntsman, rushed to him, and wanted to help, removing his glove. It was then that he saw the ring he had given his first bride, and upon seeing her face, he recognized her. Overcome with emotion, he kissed her, and when she opened her eyes, he said, "You are mine, and I am yours, and no one in the world can change that." He sent a messenger to the other bride, asking her to return to her kingdom, as he already had a wife, and one who had found an old key did not need a new one. Thus, the wedding was celebrated, and the lion was once again held in favor, as he had spoken the truth after all. The Thief and His Master, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Hans wanted to apprentice his son to a trade, so he went to church and prayed to the Lord God to determine which trade would be most beneficial for him. The church clerk, standing behind the altar, said, "Thieving, thieving." Upon hearing this, Hans returned to his son and informed him that he was to learn thieving as directed by the Lord God. Hans and his son then set out to find someone skilled in thieving. They journeyed for a long time and eventually entered a vast forest, where they found a small house occupied by an elderly woman. Hans asked her, "Do you know of someone skilled in thieving?" The woman replied, "You can learn that skill here very well. My son is a master of it." Hans then spoke with the son and inquired about his expertise in thieving. The master thief assured him, "I will teach your son well. Return after a year, and if you still recognize your son, I will not accept any payment for his training. However, if you do not recognize him, you must pay me 200 thalers." Hans returned home, and his son diligently learned witchcraft and thieving. When the year ended, Hans was anxious about how he would recognize his son. As he wandered about troubled, he encountered a little dwarf who asked him, "What troubles you, that you are always so distressed?" Hans explained, "A year ago, I placed my son with a master thief who instructed me to return after a year. If I did not recognize my son then, I would owe him 200 thalers. But if I did recognize him, I would owe nothing. Now I fear not recognizing him and do not know where to get the money." The dwarf advised him to take a small basket of bread and stand under the chimney. "There is a basket on the crossbeam with a little bird peeping out. That is your son." Hans followed the dwarf's advice, throwing a basket of black bread in front of the basket with the bird. The little bird emerged and looked up. "Hello, my son. Are you here?" exclaimed the father. The son was overjoyed to see his father, but the master thief said, "You must have been prompted by the devil. Otherwise, how could you have known your son? Father, let us go, said the son. Father and son then journeyed homeward. Along the way, a carriage passed by, and the son said to his father, I will transform myself into a large greyhound, and you can earn a great deal of money with me. The gentleman in the carriage called out, Will you sell your dog? Yes, replied the father. How much do you want for it? Asked the gentleman. 30 thalers. That's quite a lot, but as it is such a fine dog, I will take it, said the gentleman, buying the dog and placing it in his carriage. However, shortly afterward, the dog leaped out through the window and returned to his father, no longer a greyhound. They returned home together. The next day, there was a fair in the nearby town. The son said to his father, Now I will transform myself into a beautiful horse, and you can sell me. But after selling me, you must remove my bridle, or I cannot turn back into a man. The father took the horse to the fair, where the master thief appeared and bought the horse for 100 thalers. However, the father forgot to remove the bridle. When the maid crossed the stable threshold, the horse exclaimed, Take off my bridle! Take off my bridle! Startled, the maid asked, Can you speak? She removed the bridle, and the horse turned into a sparrow and flew out of the door, with the wizard turned sparrow chasing after him. They met and cast lots. The master lost and transformed into a fish. The youth also became a fish, and they cast lots again, with the master losing once more. Finally, the master transformed into a rooster, and the youth became a fox, biting off the rooster's head. Thus, the master died and has remained dead to this day. Jorinda and Joringel, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. There was once an old castle in the midst of a large, dense forest, and within it dwelled an old woman who was a witch all alone. During the day, she transformed herself into a cat or a screech owl, but in the evening, she resumed her human form. She had the power to lure wild animals and birds to her, whom she would then slaughter, cook, and roast. Anyone who came within 100 paces of the castle would be compelled to stop and could not move from that spot until she released them. If an innocent maiden entered this circle, she would transform her into a bird, imprison her in a wicker cage, and store the cage in a room within the castle. There were approximately 7,000 such cages of rare birds in the castle. Now there was a maiden named Jorinda, who was more beautiful than all other girls. She and a handsome youth named Joringel had promised to marry each other. They were still in the days of their engagement, and their greatest joy was being together. One day, so that they could converse undisturbed, they went for a walk in the forest. Be careful, said Joringel, not to come too close to the castle. It was a beautiful evening. The sun shone brightly through the trunks of the trees into the dark green of the forest, and the turtle doves sang mournfully on the young branches of the birch trees. Jorinda wept occasionally. She sat down in the sunshine and was sorrowful. Joringel was also sad. They were as distressed as if they were about to die. Then they looked around, completely at a loss, not knowing which way to go home. The sun was still half above the mountain and half set. Joringel peered through the bushes and saw the old walls of the castle nearby. He was horrified and filled with mortal fear. Jorinda sang, My little bird with the red ring sings sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. It sings of the dove's impending end, sings sorrow, sore, cuckoo, coo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Joringel looked for Jorinda. She had been transformed into a nightingale and sang cuckoo, cuckoo. A screech owl with glowing eyes circled her 3 times and cried 3 times. To-woo, to-woo, to-woo! Joringel couldn't move. He stood there like a statue, unable to weep, speak, or move hand or foot. The sun had now set. The owl flew into the thicket, and immediately afterward, a hunchbacked old woman emerged from it, yellow and lean, with large red eyes and a hooked nose that reached down to her chin. She muttered to herself, caught the nightingale, and carried it away in her hand. Joringel couldn't speak or move from the spot. The nightingale was gone. Finally, the woman returned and said in a hollow voice, Greetings, Zachiel. When the moon shines on the cage, Zachiel, release it at once. Then Joringel was released. He fell to his knees before the woman and begged her to return his Jorinda to him, but she said he would never have her again and left. He called out, he wept, he lamented, but all in vain, Oh, what will become of me? Joringel left and eventually came to a strange village. There he tended sheep for a long time. Often he walked around the castle, but never too close to it. Finally, one night, he dreamt that he found a blood-red flower, in the middle of which was a beautiful large pearl. He picked the flower and went with it to the castle, and everything he touched with the flower was freed from enchantment. He also dreamt that this flower would help him recover his Jorinda. In the morning, when he awoke, he began to search over hill and dale to find such a flower. He searched until the 9th day, and then, early in the morning, he found the blood-red flower. In the middle of it was a large dewdrop, as big as the finest pearl. Day and night, he journeyed with this flower toward the castle. When he was within 100 paces of it, he was not held fast but walked up to the door. Joringel was overjoyed. He touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open. He walked through the courtyard, listening for the sound of the birds. Finally, he heard it. He continued on and found the room from which the sound came, and there the witch was feeding the birds in the 7,000 cages. When she saw Joringel, she was furious, very furious, and scolded and spat poison and gall at him, but she couldn't come within 2 paces of him. He paid her no mind and went to inspect the cages with the birds. But there were many hundred nightingales. How was he to find his Jorinda again? Just then, he saw the old woman stealthily take away a cage with a bird in it and head toward the door. He swiftly sprang toward her, touched the cage with the flower, and also touched the old woman. Now she could no longer bewitch anyone, and there stood Jorinda, embracing him around the neck, as beautiful as ever. The Three Children of Fortune, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Once a father called his 3 sons to him as he neared the end of his life. To the eldest, he gave a rooster, to the second, a scythe, and to the youngest, a cat. "I am old," he said, "and my death is near. I wanted to provide for you before I go. I have no money to give you, but these gifts, though they seem of little worth, can bring you great fortune if you use them wisely. Find a land where these things are still unknown, and your future will be bright." After their father's death, the eldest son set out with his rooster. But wherever he went, the rooster was already known. In the towns, he saw them perched high on steeples, turning with the wind. In the villages, he heard many roosters crowing, and no one found them extraordinary. It seemed unlikely that he would find his fortune this way. Eventually, he arrived at an island where the people had never seen a rooster and didn't know how to measure time properly. They knew when it was morning or evening, but at night, if they didn't sleep, they had no way to tell the hours. "Look," he said, "what a magnificent creature. It has a ruby-red crown on its head and spurs like a knight. It crows 3 times each night at fixed hours, and after its last call, the sun soon rises. If it crows during the day, take heed, for a change in weather is coming." The people were delighted. They stayed awake an entire night, listening with great pleasure as the rooster crowed loudly and clearly at 2, 4, and 6 o'clock. They asked if the bird was for sale and what he wanted for it. "About as much gold as a donkey can carry," he replied. "A small price for such a marvelous creature," they exclaimed, and gladly paid what he asked. When the eldest brother returned home with his wealth, his brothers were astonished. The second brother then decided to try his luck with his scythe. He set out, but everywhere he went, he saw laborers with scythes on their shoulders, just like his own. Finally, he found an island where the people had no scythes. When their grain was ripe, they would bring out cannons to harvest it, shooting down the stalks. This method was highly inefficient. Some shots missed entirely, while others destroyed the ears of grain, resulting in significant losses. The noise was also unbearable. The second brother demonstrated how to use the scythe, cutting the grain silently and swiftly. The people were amazed and agreed to give him a horse loaded with as much gold as it could carry in exchange for the scythe. The youngest brother now wanted to find the right place for his cat. Like his brothers, he found that while he stayed on the mainland, there was no market for his gift. Cats were everywhere, and there were so many that newborn kittens were often drowned. At last, he sailed to an island where cats had never been seen before. There, the mice had become a severe problem. They ran over tables and benches, whether the owner was present or not. The people were desperate. Even the king in his palace couldn't protect himself from the rodents. Mice squeaked in every corner, gnawing at anything they could find. The cat immediately started her hunt and quickly cleared several rooms of mice. The people begged the king to buy the miraculous animal for the kingdom. The king agreed and gave a mule laden with gold in return for the cat. The youngest brother returned home with the greatest treasure of all. In the royal palace, the cat continued her work, catching so many mice that they could no longer be counted. Eventually, she became warm and thirsty from her efforts, so she stopped, lifted her head, and cried, "Mew, mew." The king and his court, hearing this strange cry, were terrified and fled the palace in fear. After consulting, the king decided to send a herald to the cat, demanding that she leave the palace or face force. The counselors argued, "We would rather be plagued by mice, as we are used to them, than risk our lives to such a monster." A young noble was sent to ask the cat if she would leave peacefully, but the thirsty cat only answered, "Mew, mew." The youth interpreted this as a firm refusal and reported back to the king. "Then," said the counselors, "she must yield to force." Cannons were brought up and the palace was set ablaze. When the fire reached the room where the cat was, she jumped safely out of a window. But the attackers did not stop until the entire palace was reduced to rubble.